Good evening and welcome to our October 15th, 2025 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We have a couple commissioners joining us virtually online, Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Kelly, welcome. For anybody who's here in person, paper copies of the agenda are on the back table. I believe there's also a pot of coffee if anybody would like that. And a full packet is available on our website with all details included in each agenda item. Reviewing our full agenda first, we will consider our consent agenda. There are 6 items on that list, after which we will have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we do apply certain rules regarding public comments. We will do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and residence if you are willing for our meeting minutes, and address your comments to the commission directly. We will hear from people who are in person first, then look to our Zoom meeting attendees. Please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function online if you wish to provide your public comment virtually. Please also know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you do leave your contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered. After general public comment concludes, we'll move on to our regular business agenda item for tonight. There are 3 items on our regular agenda this evening. For each action item, we will hear from staff first or an applicant, followed by questions from the commission, and then we will open the floor for public comment that is relevant to each agenda item along the way. Once public comment is concluded, we will bring that item back to the commission for further discussion and a vote on any action items. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, I will jump into the consent agenda. Commissioners, does anybody wish to pull anything for further questions or discussion? Seeing none in person, seeing no head nods online, I'll open it for public comment. Is there anybody in the public who wishes to pull this or pull anything from our consent agenda for further questions? Anybody raise their hand online, Sarah? Okay, great. I'll bring that back to the commission and ready for a motion.
I move that consent agenda items 1.1 through 1.6 be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to general public comment. Is there anybody in the building with us today that would like to provide general public comment at this time? All right, seeing no takers. Any virtual hands now, Sarah? Okay, we will close general public comment and move right on into our regular agenda. Our first item, 3.1, is an update from administration about our Community Child Care Scholarship Challenge Fund request that we discussed during our budget session. I believe I'm turning this over to Jill Joliker.
Thanks, Commissioners. As outlined in the cover memo, this is a revisit of a line item, a request that you all approved for inclusion in the 2026 budget. It is a request that is directly related to one of the strategies in the Anti-Poverty Community Health Plan related to early education and care. It proposes to, the original request was to provide funding for a community-wide child care scholarship fund, which is directly in the Anti-Poverty Community Health Plan. And we talked about who that's aimed to serve. It's an existing program, who administers it today, how it's, who are the partners. And one of the things that we talked about during the budget conversation was that the commission wanted to get a little more information about how would it be structured, how would it be administered, would it be structured in the form of a challenge grant, what would partnerships look like in terms of working with the business community and other partners. And so we're back with you today to provide some greater detail. I have some subject matter experts here in the room that I want to make sure I'm flagging if there's questions that I can't answer that are better suited for them. Marie Taylor, who's the Executive Director of Positive Bright Start, is here, and Sunday Monson is here as well from Positive Bright Start. Sunday directly oversees the scholarship program as well as other organizational duties within Positive Bright Start, but one of her primary roles is the administration of the scholarship fund. We outline in the background materials that this is the scholarship program has been core to the functions of Positive Bright Start for several years. They have strong partnerships with several of the childcare provider organizations in the community, and what we are proposing and is outlined in the background materials is that the $100,000 would be, in a sense, a pledge in the form that would establish a one-time childcare scholarship challenge fund. So we've outlined in this what would the objectives be? What's the target and the time frame? Really looking at that time frame, thinking about being, very time limited, and that, it would be it would be open January 1 and it would wrap up December 2026. So there's a sense of urgency there is the thought there. We provide an example of the match ratio there and gave an example that is what we hope we could potentially see more of. For 2025, the Lawrence Restaurant Association, the Mass Street Fish House made a pledge that is currently been incorporated into the program. And we hope that a challenge grant framework will just entice further partnerships like that. And I know this is our timing might also be very good as we look to the World Cup coming up as well, because I know in terms of workforce, that's going to be a huge need that we've talked about just in the planning stages, but we know that it's going to be a need in the future. I mentioned already what the administration of the fund is currently covered by Positive Bright Start. They have funding from the Kansas Early Childhood Block Grant, and they will continue to do that. So there'll be no cost to administer the scholarships, and the way that the funds would be awarded from the county would be essentially when a pledge is received, we would be invoiced for our matching amount and we would distribute that matching amount. But we would want to see those pledges coming in to reimburse or at least, so to speak, the way we do with a lot of our service agreements. We would see a pledge come in and we would make our matching contribution. Talk a little bit here about priority donors and how we're going to engage them. One of the first ones is Douglas County Business and Industry. Marie and I had a great conversation with the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce and got a lot of support from them about how they can directly connect with their members and how we can talk even with our EDC partners about how they can come alongside and be supporters of this. So we wanted to get to the point where we have we have support from the commission on the challenge grant framework, and then I would anticipate us moving forward with coming up with a plan to share this information with business partners through the chamber. Private individual donors and foundation. I know that Marie shared that there's a lot of support from the Douglas County Community Foundation just around the idea here. They know it's a need. The Community Foundation has been heavily invested in the Community Health Improvement Plan, but we know there might be other foundations that this will entice as well. And then partner child care agency stakeholders. So in parentheses, I put their board of directors. The thought there is that, the board of directors of the not-for-profits that are already that are already being a part of the Child Care Scholarship Fund, they would take advantage of this opportunity to reach out to their donor base and say, hey, this is a great opportunity, a collective impact opportunity. So we would be asking the board members of the not-for-profits that are a part of this to be, again, a part of a collective impact opportunity. And then we would want to think about tailoring appeals to new and returning donors. The Rice Foundation has historically been a funder of the scholarship program, and we hope that this challenge grant opportunity will be something that will renew that partnership and entice them to be a part of, to get to that finish line on drawing down all these dollars. So it's a pretty simple framework proposal. I gave you a lot of information in terms of background. And I'm going to stop there and see what questions you all have of me or some of our partners that are here.
I had a question about the way I read the proposal. We would match grants over $10,000. And it seems to me a lot of big companies could afford that, but there might be smaller companies that would prefer to donate 1,000 or some lesser amount. And I was just wondering if there's any thought to making that grant amount smaller.
Marie and I actually talked about that. And I think the thought was when you think about the cost of what is the cost to underwrite a scholarship, $1,000 would be appreciated, of course, but in terms of like the increments would be more impactful if they're a little bit higher. But I don't think we're hardwired to that. This is a proposal, so I think we can be flexible.
And if I could even add to that, Jane, I mean, I think that's a great idea, but even with challenge grants, even with small increments, I think we could encourage $1,000 donors to come together and reach that $10,000 together. So they could actually create momentum and have a $10,000 match together to encourage an entity that can do a larger match to then match their 10,000, right? So if you have a donor that can only do $1,000 match, get them to really have that collective impact, right, Jill, to that $10,000 level. And then an entity that can do 10, they match the 10, you got 20. And then maybe someone else that can match 20, right? They come in and they match it to make it 40. So you really then maximize that collective impact.
Who would perform that consolidation effort?
I mean, I would put that onus on, if it's a business, for them to pull together those commitments and to present something that says we have pulled together a $10,000, $15,000 or $20,000 pledge of support, and they figure out whoever's going to write a check. Maybe it's multiple checks that go to Positive Bright Start. As long as we see that amount come in, I think there's creative ways for those matches to be put together, like Commissioner Anderson has said. I think we just need to see the documentation of the funding being sent to Positive Bright Start.
So all the money goes directly to them and not through the Douglas County Community Foundation?
No, Positive Bright Start administers the scholarship program today, and they distribute it to the different organizations. And in the materials that I gave you, I wanted to make sure that we flagged, in terms of the track record of Positive Bright Start to fulfill this capacity. One of the documents that you have in here, when you look at the spreadsheet that you received, when you look at the August 2020 through December 2020 COVID-19 funding that they received a substantial amount of money from Douglas County to be able to, as part of the Douglas County CARES Act, to administer scholarships. So I mentioned that they have the capacity to put out to process these very smoothly with families and the providers.
And there are tools available to nonprofits to track challenge grants and matching grants that are completely free. So there are ways for collaboration to happen so that these can be tracked very seamlessly and at a zero cost.
Thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Kelly, Commissioner Rowley, do you have any questions for staff at this time or for our partners in the audience?
Jill, this is Commissioner Kelly. I read through the eligibility requirements for the early education programs. Are we thinking that those requirements, I mean, those were specific to the grant dollars for that program? Are we thinking the requirements would be the same?
Yes, that's how we're presuming it to date, because by staying consistent with that framework compels high standards in the early education outcomes. And I think that's a benefit for us in terms of meeting those goals that are in the community health improvement plan.
And who might not meet that, which early childhood education providers might not meet those eligibility requirements?
I might ask Sunday Sunday or Marie, if you want to just talk about the obligations that go along with it's reporting data largely is one of the biggest, up at the podium. That might be just explaining how those eligibility standards play out, what is compelled of organizations. And a lot of it, I think, Commissioner Kelly, is the reporting requirements that go into it. But Marie, when you go up there, just hit the green button.
Okay. Hi, Commissioner Kelly. It's Marie Taylor.
Hello.
Let's see. I'm going to answer it maybe a couple different ways for you. I hear you said providers. The specificness to the way we run the grant is make sure that we are serving the families with most need first. So in all that background information, you saw that we will be giving out those scholarships to the families who like really can't afford it, right? And then we'd move up to families who can sort of not afford it. So that is part of what those guidelines will be for us. And then when you're asking about, tell me a little bit more about what you mean about which providers might not qualify.
So in our packet, we have eligibility and responsibility of participating early education programs, and it lists some requirements for their programs. And my question was around, are we planning to follow those same requirements, and who might that exclude?
Perfect. Thank you. That's super helpful. We would not need to exclude anyone necessarily. If there are any providers in our county, like we would just be looking countywide. So it's bigger than Lawrence, but we would be able to be partners with any provider that would like to come alongside us. As you saw, there's things they would need to do for us, but there has not been anyone we have had to say no because they can't meet those. We've definitely had home providers that have been part of our program before, so that is part of it as well. It's not just centers. For us, if we get into the bigger programs, like Hilltop has been part of our program for a long time, but they then got so big that we would need to be hiring more people to help serve that need. So like quantity at some point might be an issue for us, but to this point, we have never seen any providers that could not meet that. If they were willing to do it, we are absolutely willing to support and be part of that with them.
Yeah, just one more question. I don't know if it's for you or Jill. I know there's been conversations with groups that have been working on this about increasing wages or doing all we can to encourage increasing wages, because sometimes for those working in early childhood education, they're the very people we're trying to help serve because they qualify. Was there any discussion? And I'm not saying, I want to make sure I'm not saying that I'm trying to load this question. I'm just interested in hearing if there was any discussion about what wage each of these early childhood providers pays for their staff.
I would say that is a goal that we are thinking about in tandem with this strategy. Because the balancing act with the goals that we have in this part of the community health improvement plan it's pressures at both ends. It's families being able to afford it and the centers being able to pay a living competitive wage to the workforce. And we are constantly being mindful of those things. And so one of the other strategies that's in the anti-poverty community health plan is advancing the apprenticeship program and being really thoughtful about the realities of advancing that apprenticeship program and what are the burdens that the providers face in putting some of their staff through those apprenticeship programs. And a lot of it is, having a sufficient amount of operating dollars that they can pay the wages that are required once folks have gone through that apprenticeship program. So I think it's a balancing act. We're trying to balance at both ends of the spectrum there. If that makes sense, we will not lose sight of that, though.
Okay, thanks.
I had one more question, probably totally unrelated, but what do people who work night shifts do with their kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have found, at least in our work, that it seems like families are looking for other family members, other places that feel more like home for children to be in night care. We haven't had a lot of families come to us and ask for that. I know that it's a need in our community, but it seems to me that it is a lot more about people finding people they know. Just when you think about a child falling asleep and sleeping for 8 hours, where do you want that to happen? And in an industrial childcare center, not as much as maybe you want it in someone's home. So that's still something that's super tricky that we're trying to figure out as an early childhood community for sure.
Thank you.
I can say that, the Children's Community Center in terms of mapping out the need for the childcare needs across the county 24/7 is like one of the areas, the gaps that we know we have. We've heard, we talked a lot about that need during the COVID pandemic. But I think we need to make a little more progress on filling the spots that we have now. I think what's happening right now is that it feels like we have a good amount of childcare spots that are available, and especially when we think about the Children's Community Center projects that is going to be opening here very soon, we have a good amount of spots. The challenge right now is filling those spots, and the challenge for that is that the families that need it most can't pay for it, or it's just not worth it for them to enter the workforce and put their kids in care given the cost.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Thank you, Marie. Excuse me. Is there anybody here in the building who would like to provide public comment on this agenda item? Okay, anybody online with us, Sarah? Okay, close public comment and bring this back for any further commissioner discussion or motions. I'll just start by saying I really appreciate that our discussion in July and during our budget session about this idea of how do we maybe maximize the investment and try and get a clearer picture of how we might be able to engage some of our business community in particular in meeting this need for our community. I feel really good about how that conversation has resulted in what seems like a pretty straightforward and hopefully fruitful plan to, again, maximize Douglas County's investment and double the impact in a year's time, hopefully, for investment in these scholarships while we continue to work through the CHIP and sort of all the different angles that we're trying to consider how childcare both contributes to economic development in our community and prosperity, as well as, just health and education for children and families too.
This is Commissioner Willie. I really appreciate the written comment that we have that was in our packet, letters of support from, across the community for this project. And I also was very glad for Jill, the detail of kind of walking through what this program would be. So I'm very supportive. I think this is a great thing for our community. And I love that it's structured as a match and as a challenge grant.
This is Commissioner Kelly. I just want to echo Commissioner Willie a little bit. And I don't know that we had all of these business partners who were stepping up before. So it's really great to see that maybe this has inspired them. And I was also excited to receive some communication from the Community Foundation. They're excited to get on board as well. So it really seems like we're seeing a community that's coming together to address a challenge. And that's really what I had hoped for when we had this conversation at the budget level. Jill, I appreciate your work staying with this. I am interested to learn as we go through this about how we'll track the results of this. What will be the impacts, where people who may not have been employed before due to the expense of childcare may be employed now. Some of those things, but I'm sure you'll work that out.
Agreed. I think childcare and employment go hand in hand, especially when we think about health and well-being and mental health and well-being. And so really excited that we've had a lot of interest and business interest and that this has really been framed around a challenge grant, because I think anytime that we can bring community members, donors, individuals, business partners to the table to really support something like this, I think it brings the community together. So just appreciate staff's time on this and all the work that's been done.
For a motion, which I suppose I could make. It's Commissioner Reed, I move to authorize the county administrator's office to proceed with proposed community child care scholarship challenge fund as detailed in this agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes unanimously. All right. Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Marie, and other community partners of ours. We're excited to hear how this goes. Moving on to agenda item 3.2, we have an update, a similar conversation that started at budget time, where you've asked for some additional information about how we think about our municipalities' Fight Addiction Fund and Special Alcohol Fund. And with that, looks like I'm turning it over to Jake.
Thanks, Commissioners. Jake Broadbent, Assistant to the County Administrator. We have the Municipalities Fight Addiction Fund. I'm going to call it the MFA Fund. It's a tongue twister. And the Special Alcohol Fund. This is some follow-up from budget time, like you mentioned. You asked for more info on how each fund can be used, the differences between them, and how we plan to distribute the funding. First, I'll go over the MFA Fund. This is funded by national opioid settlements, and the funding must be used to prevent, reduce, or treat substance abuse or reimburse past related costs by the county. This funding is slightly more flexible than the special alcohol funding, but they're very similar. And both are set out in state law and what we can use them for. The county will receive this funding for about 13 more years. And I just want to make sure it's clear that these are front-loaded payments. So we've received probably about around half of the funding that we'll receive total. And the AG's office has a forecast for the annual amounts, but it's going to change pretty substantially soon once the Purdue settlement is finalized, because that's the second largest payout it's expected to be. Next, the Special Alcohol Fund. This comes from a 10% sales tax on alcoholic drinks sold in the county. We receive the funds from sales in the unincorporated areas and smaller cities under 6,000, population of 6,000, and that's Baldwin City and Lecompton and Douglas County. This funding is restricted to programs that prevent, treat, or educate about alcohol and drug abuse. And historically, it's smaller. The annual amount we receive is smaller than the MFA fund, around 50 to 70,000 a year versus about 200,000 for the MFA fund. But like I said earlier, the MFA fund funding will go down gradually as we go on. Attached in your packet is a methodology for allocating the funding that staff has created. There will be 2 application periods. One will be during the regular county budget process. It'll have a due date of around April. And then one at the end of the year for current community partners. Forgot to mention during the first one of the regular county budget cycle is open to any organization. The second in December will only be open to current community partners. After these applications are turned in, staff will review them. They'll forward them to the county administrator, and then we'll bring them to you for your approval. Successful proposals will show organizational stability, one-time expenses. They will fit within the legal restrictions of how we can use the funding, and they will leverage other funding sources. And then some next steps. Admin staff are also talking with our public safety departments about some internal projects, what we can use that for. And Katie has been talking to those departments. So if you have any questions, she should be able to answer those.
Great. Thank you for the overview, Jake, and thanks for the work on really all of staff's work on coming up with some framework for us to sort of start trying to think more intentionally about how we're allocating these funds, as especially in light of the fact that they are going to gradually go down, specific to the opioid settlement funds. So I appreciate the work on this. I personally don't have any questions right now. Do other commissioners have questions?
I have one, Commissioner Willie. So I know in the last few years, we have attracted some kind of new service providers in the substance use prevention space. But how do we proactively kind of advertise this as an opportunity, like that these funds are available? Because you mentioned that during a regular budget cycle, kind of open to anyone that can provide services in Douglas County that fit what the restrictions are for those accounts. And then that second kind of grant period is just for the folks that we've included in our budget cycle. So how do we kind of get that word out to potential new partners and existing partners?
Commissioner Willie, this is Jill Joliker. I think today's conversation is step one, just having an open conversation about it. And I know we have some of our existing partners in the room, even, and maybe some that are listening. But I think it will be for starters, it will largely be based on staff conversations with our existing partners that we are already working with. I think, staff has worked really diligently in the behavioral health space, but also in the public safety, human services space to when we have capacity challenges with, in terms of meeting the need in the community, we're looking out in what's working in other communities. For instance, Mirror Inc. is a newer partner to Douglas County, and they've been operating really successfully in Topeka, Shawnee County and other parts of the state. So I think in many ways, for starters, Commissioner Willie, it is staff having those one-on-one conversations with existing partners. And then I know that through the work that the budget process that and the sessions that Jake and Brooke and initiated to set up this past year's budget cycle, looking ahead to 2026, had some really important webinar sessions with our partners, just like making sure that they understood, hey, you can submit projects that are specific to these funds. So here are the requirements that go along that. So I think we would just be reiterating that in our ongoing communications as part of the budget process as well. But I think we want to get feedback from commissioners as well as like, are there other ways that we can advertise these opportunities? But also being really careful because it's one-time money. And as Jake said, it's going to go down eventually. Yeah.
And I think that's my question. So knowing that it is one-time money, what will be that process for kind of evaluating the needs across the county? Will there be a gap analysis so that the use of these funds will really kind of fill a gap and have the biggest impact that the dollars can actually have?
Commissioner, we didn't specifically say we didn't want these to supplant other funding, but I do think that was somewhat of our intent, was that, so that would get at a gap. So if there's already funding in place for a certain service or program, we could be more explicit about making sure that they're identifying, gaps in coverage or the things that aren't being done, if that would help providers get a better idea of what's going on. I think for us, it really is trying to just make sure that these don't go to ongoing things like staff. I think it can go for services that might not that are on a time limited basis. And so I think that's the line that we have to sort of walk in this space is, could it pay for treatment, for example, but maybe just for 1 year's worth of treatment? And then what becomes the sustainability of that? That's where I think staff's a little nervous. I do want to also point out, previous to this process, we have not really highlighted this with our own internal service departments. So the Sheriff's Office, Reentry, Criminal Justice Services, District Court, we have it wasn't viewed as something they could access. So I think once we kind of open their eyes to the potential to use some of these funds, I think that will also help us identify gaps that are coming at our own departments every day. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
I had a question. I noticed these funds have to be segregated in a separate account. My question is, are the idle funds invested, and do those investments have to be segregated from other monies?
I'd have to check with the treasurer for sure. I'm sure they probably are invested in our idle funds. My assumption is that we distribute interest to separate funds. So my assumption is they receive that interest, but I can follow up on that if you'd prefer to just have me make sure.
Yeah, and well, it's not on here, but we don't have the detail. Just curious if we're getting interest income into that fund
I
also.
think Jake and I, we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have kind of a question that relates to that a little bit, and that is, with most of our funds, we're funding ongoing things and positions and such that, we don't want to get, caught without being able to cover those things. So we keep a fund balance that, just like we'd ask for any of our partners and nonprofits to, that could cover, a certain amount of time for that. But this being, focused on one-time funds, very specific, targeted, should the intention just be to spend that balance down each year and just get those funds out into the community?
I think we want to balance that with good projects. And so particularly with the opioid funds that are front loaded, I think we want to balance that. I think for I think if we get good projects, I think we're comfortable spending them down quicker as long as we feel like the community, that we haven't funded something that we're going to leave the community hanging for if there's not available funds in the previous year. But I'd say like with special alcohol, that's been really reliable in terms of what that dollar amount is. So I have no problem allocating those projects out because we've been pretty reliable getting those funds back every year.
I would just add that I think part of that, when Sarah says evaluating projects, one of the things we're looking at is, does the organization requesting the funds have a plan to actually spend those dollars? If we award them, do they have the capacity to complete the project that is the scope of the project that they're asking for funding for? Is that something they can actually pull off?
Okay, any other questions from commissioners at this time? Okay, thank you, Jake and Jill. Go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to provide public comment on this item? All right, seeing no takers. Any virtual hands yet? All right, no speakers yet. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any additional comments or motions.
Yes, Commissioner Willie, I'd follow up. I like having a more robust framework that we can share with partners about these are the kinds of projects we're looking for. This is when you can apply for them, that sort of thing. And I know it is a little tricky to find projects that good projects that require one-time dollars that aren't, looking for something that's ongoing, because these funds, and I'm thinking especially of the municipalities fight addiction fund, that, we can't support ongoing because those funds will dwindle and then be gone. And they're not a lot coming in each year. But I think that advertising that, here's the process and getting this out in front of existing and new partners that, that these funds, we want them to get out into the community and really do the work that they're intended for.
Recommend we authorize the county administrator to proceed with a proposed procedure for evaluating and awarding MFAF and special alcohol funding requests from community partners.
Second, moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you again, staff, for your work on this. All right, commissioners, that brings us to our last regular agenda item, which it looks like Jake is back for. And I'll just turn it over to you to introduce this time.
Next, we have the 2026 service agreement. This is really the next step after commissioners approve the budget for allocating our funding to community partners. And partners that are under $80,000 go on a community partner agreement that has no data reporting. They get their funding twice a year. And partners that get over $80,000 go on a service agreement. And some of the differences with this, as I mentioned, service agreements, they are invoice based. It's either monthly or quarterly. They come with a data reporting element. When partners send their invoices, they go to staff liaisons at the county. That's Jill, Sean, Bob, Katie, and Caitlin. They review the invoices and then send them over to finance staff to process the payments. And also the scope of the agreements is more robust. It outlines how partners spend the county funds and the exhibits, Exhibit A. Some of the recent updates we made, last year, legal reviewed and revised the standard service agreement just to take a look at it, make sure everything is in shape. This year, staff proposed updates to better reflect current practices and strengthen accountability. Some of the exhibits, this is also in your packet, A through C, those are unique to each partner. And then we also have the body of the agreement and Exhibit D, those are standard across all partners. But Exhibit D only applies to behavioral health partners. In your packet, there is a list of partners by agreement type and also redlined and clean versions of the service agreement in Exhibit D. Once this agreement is approved, staff liaisons will work with each partner to craft the exhibits before the end of the year and then we'll be ready to process payments next year. And I'll open it up for any questions.
I had a question about Just Food. It's on the list for community partner agreements, but it's included in Exhibit D, which I think is for the service agreements.
Yeah, that clause that you're referencing, I think, is to work with continuum of care partners. That's just an example of a partner that's in the continuum of care. But they are on a community partner agreement because they receive less than 80,000.
It's essentially any safety net provider. We want that within that continuum of care, and Just Food is one of them. Cooperative partnerships.
Okay.
This Commissioner Kelly, Jake, did you send this revised agreement to community partners? And if you did you get any feedback on it?
No, we haven't yet, but
We did notify him about this meeting and it was a part of the agenda packet.
Okay, thank you.
I would say this is a pretty momentous process for us all internally. As you can tell, there's a lot of people involved and there's a lot of conversations that happen. So we try as hard as possible to make this document as consistent, which is sometimes to the frustration of our service providers. They would love a very catered and tailored agreement to them, but it's millions of dollars in funds that we're managing.
Well, if Schedule C differs for each partner,
Correct.
the uniqueness of whatever they're doing is addressed in Schedule C, right?
That's our hope, but I think even in the base agreement, sometimes partners, would like to tweak. So we work really hard to try to keep that consistent.
I was going to say too, I was going through this agreement with a new partner that you'll hear about in the coming weeks in the supportive housing space, and going through every single section in the service agreement. I would just say that there is a reason, every section in that agreement, there's a reason why it's in there. We have had a situation where we've needed information. We've needed to frankly just have accountability and make sure that we're getting what we're paying for in terms of, and that's reflected in this agreement. So we've been very thoughtful about that. And I think we can give examples of why every element in here is important. And I would just add, one of the additions that's in Exhibit D, specifically having documented policies regarding service interruptions, grievances. That's a real important one that came about that we just want to make sure that any agency that gets funding from us has one of those policies in place, that they're sharing it, that it's transparent, and that they have a grievance or an appeal process. Again, only as it relates to services that are funded by the county, but that's something that came up. So we felt like it was important to put that in there in our agreement.
I have a question. I know one of the kind of topics that had come up was how to manage funding for capital projects when it's not an ongoing kind of service agreement kind of thing. Can you address how we're managing those?
Commissioner Willie, we created a separate capital project agreement that I think we shared with you all. I think that we got it finalized. I want to say maybe really early this year or late last year. So this is the first year, 2025 was the first year that we operationalized that capital project agreement with partners like Cardinal Housing, 9th Street Missionary Baptist Church, DECA. We did a retroactive one with Bert Nash. So that agreement, I don't anticipate it changing because in practice, it's worked pretty well. It works very similar to the service agreement in that we compel agencies to request reimbursement for expenses, document the expenses. But we also go a little further in that capital project request in that we ask for a budget for the total project. We want to see all the funding sources. Yeah, I will just say that, and we created that agreement and the reporting mechanisms that come along with it to look a whole lot like the City of Lawrence Affordable Housing Advisory Board, because a lot of those agencies have requested funding from AHAB as well. And it makes it a little easier for them to consistently report with both of our organizations in similar fashions. And so far it's worked pretty well.
That's great. I appreciate the clarification because I was looking to see if it was wrapped into this. So I know we had a discussion about a separate agreement, so I'm happy with that. I have a second question about kind of one of the changes, and I know we've struggled to get partners to complete their financial documents and give those to us, including their 990s and audits. And so I'm glad to see some teeth behind that. There's really no reason that they can't comply with that if they expect to get funding. But the timing of audits and 990s is sometimes out of the hands of nonprofits. It's really hard to find, auditors and such that will take those on for a reasonable price. So they end up kind of getting pushed further into the year. So, we added a clause, let's see, I think it's G9G, I think, about, the reimbursements will come, the quarterly reimbursements will come after they've kind of given us their documents, and also that they have a current, 990 or audit on file. I just want to make sure that we have the ability within that to kind of give the grace for what that timing looks like for organizations, especially smaller ones.
Yeah, I think we worded it the most recently available audit or 990. So we can work with partners to get draft audits or just the most recently available audit and be able to pay.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for staff?
I just have one more question about MyRC. Because I noticed there was an addition here from MyRC. So how is it going with MyRC and getting adoption around MyRC?
Really glad you asked that. We had an exciting launch last week of an expanded SUD 42 CFR partition. So there's a data hierarchy in MyRC that's related to the users within the client-facing users within the organization. So at the top of that hierarchy data food chain of who can see mutual clients are the 42 CFR SUD providers. And historically, there's only been one, and that's been DECA. And DECA has been a contributor consistently from the very beginning of my RC. But I'm really pleased to share that Heartland Community Health Center is the second one to get to that milestone. A ton of work was time was invested by the staff member at Johnson County that helps us with this project. That's Steve Yoder, and the staff at Heartland Community Health Center. So last week, we launched it in quietly a few weeks ago, so that the Heartland staff that are using it, and a lot of those folks are the community health workers. They're some of the highest utilizers of it. We actually get status reports nightly of usage, and the community health workers are using it the most, which is tremendous. So they tested it out. We got a little feedback, and we're working out the kinks, but overall it's been successful so far. So Heartland Community Health, we're making progress on Heartland RADAC. They're getting closer and closer to the timeline. We're still working with Bert Nash. I think just managing the complexities of their EHR with, they're prioritizing projects. So I think that one's still working, but we're very anxious to get that one up. That data is 3 years old at this point. And then we know that the additional one that I hope will be, I mentioned Heartland RADAC at that 42 CFR. Eventually, later this year, I hope we'll be in a position to have Mirror Inc. closer to that, which I know will be a really important factor for our colleagues that are doing homeless research, homeless response team doing outreach that have Mirror team embedded, and jail staff as well. So we still have, and then we also, I hope at the lower end of the partition, we're making a lot of progress as it relates to the Lawrence Community Shelter, but having to do some real creative workarounds with that. But yeah, and then I want to give a shout out also to Douglas County IT staff has taken on a considerable amount of the administration, working with county staff, with county administrator in Johnson County, but Starla, Bryce, Russell, they have been incredible. Bryce has been doing all the training. So that's a tangent. We could do a whole update on my RC at some point, but the partners are responding. And, we're not making progress as quickly as we'd like to, but we are getting there. And the agreement does give us the teeth to get that response that we need.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other questions from commissioners at this time?
Yeah, I got a question. What are we actually approving tonight? Are we just approving the word changes to what's been presented, since we don't have Exhibit C for all the various organizations?
Yes, you're approving everything but the individually specified documents, and those are administered by me after this process. So you're looking at the boilerplate and the template, and then we'll go forward and begin developing those Exhibit Cs with each service provider.
So then will you bring those back to us for approval, or how's that work?
I generally can give you access to them, but I don't put them on each agenda for approval, because generally it's consistent with what their budget application was. If there's some variance from that, I would take that back to you. But generally these are in alignment with what they requested at budget time, but they are a public document, and we put them on your OneDrive as you were getting closer to budget time so that you could review the service agreement.
Thanks.
All right. If there are no other questions from commissioners at this time, I will go ahead and open this up for public comment. Anybody here wish to make any comments on this agenda item? All right, seeing none. Anybody join us online, Sarah? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back for further discussion and motions. I'll just add appreciation in particular for the clause regarding each entity's policies around discontinuing or pausing services with their clients. And so I know, we've had those discussions in a variety of ways in this room. And I know amongst community partners, especially as collaboration has increased over years. And so I just really appreciate the thoughtful language around that. And I'm hopeful that that really does offer some transparency, for one, about what those processes and procedures are, and maybe helps, prompt creating those processes and procedures for agencies who may not have historically had one, and our ability to understand that better is something that I'm looking forward to having access to, and also hope that it just promotes some continuity too, and maybe some collaborative thinking between partners about what their individual processes for evaluation are, what their grievance processes are, appeal processes, and be able to share information in a productive way that just, again, helps us reach greater collective impact and, positive continuity in ways that make sense across these spaces. So thank you for your work on that part. Commissioners, any further discussion or motions?
Is there any public comment? Did we close that?
I opened it up and no takers.
Okay.
So they just came and went quick.
I'd like to reiterate, I'm so pleased with the staff work on this. I can read through and find instances of like there is a story behind each of the things we're asking for, and I really think this is kind of dialing in and getting us closer to that that true transparency that comes with public dollars, and making sure that we are able to hold partners accountable for the public funds that they're asking for. I know that there's been a lot of discussion, and commissioners have been involved and been brought into those conversations too, with different partners wanting more specific agreements and kind of tailored to them. And it really is a balance between what works for our staff and for administering these, and also what it gets at what exactly we're asking for each partner. I think this really does that very well. Though there was no public comment in our meeting today, I'm sure we will continue to hear from partners that would like to see something different. But I think this is an excellent document for us moving forward, and we will continue to kind of make tweaks year to year if need be. But I appreciate staff working on this.
Commissioner Willie, I appreciate those comments, and would just want to share with partners who have shared maybe sometimes with individual commissioners that staff is doing what we asked them to do, and this is what we would like to see. This is an important step in this process, is that we're very clear on the accountability measures, the data collection measures that we expect if you're going to receive the support of Douglas County taxpayers. And so I know sometimes there's some friction about that, and it seems like a lot, but it does help us make good decisions. It does genuinely account for the services that are provided with the dollars that come from our Douglas County taxpayers. So thanks to staff for your work on this, but I just wanted to underline that it really does come from the county commission, not necessarily from administration.
I'd say, that's right, Commissioner Kelly. It reflects, what we've asked our staff to help to hold our partners accountable, but it's also what our community expects for their dollars. So I know that there are conversations yet to be had with partners, but right, yeah, there's the reasons behind it.
Thank you, commissioners. Any other comments or discussion? Anybody want to make a motion?
Recommend we approve the 2026 service agreement with the changes outlined by staff and suggested by the commission.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, commissioners, that brings us to the end of our regular agenda items and to appointments. I forgot to double check memo, but do we have any appointments that are?
Yeah. I'm ready to announce an appointment for the non-lawyer position on the 7th Judicial Nominating Committee. I had 5 pretty good candidates, and I settled on Katie Fitzgerald as my appointment. I think in previous appointments, we've accidentally voted on it. So if you all want to vote on it, that's fine.
Katie is a member of our team and our criminal justice coordinator, and I think would be an excellent addition to this group.
Or do you have an opinion about whether or not we need to
I
do
don't
votes
think we
since
technically
you've
need
done
to vote.
research on
This is like the one of
recently?
the only ones that you just do individually as commissioners. You vote on everything else, so that's why I think we've done it in the past. But I think Commissioner Dorsey's nomination is sufficient for purposes of the OJA.
That sounds right to me. It sounds like it stands. And this was, expanding the commission was the prompt for researching this a little bit further and making sure we understood the particularities around these appointments. So I don't see any need to vote on it, and we'll just let the appointment stand. So thank you. Thanks for your diligence on that and filling the spot. And thanks, Katie, for your willingness to serve there. Any other appointments, top of commissioners' minds to discuss?
I should have one next week.
Okay, sounds good. All right, that moves us to miscellaneous, and we'll start with the weekly manager memo from Sarah.
Thanks, commissioners. Just lots of dates in the memo. Fall is filling up with lots of different activities. Next week, we will not have a work session. At 4 o'clock, there is the kind of open house for the Veterans Court. So I know we'll have a couple commissioners probably attend that. So we'll go ahead and notice it. And then we do not meet on the 29th. And then we will have a work session on the 5th. And that's all I have for you, commissioners, unless you have any questions for me.
Commissioners, any miscellaneous items for the good of the order?
I would just, I'll have more to share, I think, when I get back in next week, but I am at the Chamber's intercity visit trip to Des Moines and Ames, and I think it's been a really fruitful trip so far. A lot of great conversations to bring back for the commission, and I think a lot of wheels are turning in people's minds. We've got a good group here to kind of be evaluating what other communities are doing for economic development and what that means for what we could be doing. But there's a lot of lessons to be had here.
Great. Thanks for that quick update. Anything else, commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.